Welcome to the 2026 Symposium hosted by AAEEBL. It is 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we now have a fabulous opportunity to hear from Corrie and Theresa, who are at The Ohio State University. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And thanks everyone for joining us in this session. Let me go ahead and share my screen and make sure I have all the windows in the right places, which of course worked just fine 2 seconds ago. There we go. Okay, great. So glad to be sharing some of our work with you today. We are one of a few presenters that are kind of bringing in this idea of an ecosystem or ecosystem of support. Debbie mentioned this earlier. I think Megan kind of pointed this out in her keynote last week. And my disciplinary background is in ecology. So the first time I heard this analogy, I immediately latched onto it. And how happy was I this morning listening to the keynote and just the way that they just so beautifully describe ePortfolios as ecosystems. And it's kind of bringing me back to ecology days. So that was just wonderful. We are thinking about our support system as a type of ecosystem. And I think the analogy works well at that level also, because we have these different components that function on their own, but they also interconnect and they can influence and enhance each other. And if the system is working well, then we start to see these emergent properties where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So this is what we're aiming to do with our support system. And just returning to the idea of resilience from the keynote earlier, at the level of systems, we know from ecology that diverse ecosystems tend to be more resilient to disruptions. And I think for most of us, maybe all of us, we are working in a higher education environment that is experiencing quite a lot of disruption at this time. So we hope that by having a diversity of support structures, that helps us to be able to continue supporting our students in the face of those disruptions. My name's Corrie Pieterson. I am an ePortfolio specialist at Ohio State, and I'm joined by my colleague, Theresa. I don't know if you want to say a quick hello, Theresa. There she is. Okay.
Folks. I'm gonna be watching the chat and I'll answer questions if Corrie bats them my way, but I'm gonna let Corrie take the lead on this.
Great. We both work in the Office of Academic Enrichment at Ohio State, and this is it's housed in the building that you see in the image behind me, and it's a collection of program areas that are united by the use of one or more high impact practices. In practice, we do a lot of our work in our Honors and Scholars Center, part of OAE, and we'll be focusing mainly on our honors programs today, but we'll also mention a couple of other program areas that we work with. And so I'd like to start with a little bit of contextual background, kind of an introduction to our institutional context, as well as the context in honors. And that context in part determines some of our strategies for engagement. And thinking about some of the different components of this support system, previously I have thought of this in chronological terms. If we imagine when a student first joins us all the way through graduation, how are we providing supports to help them stay engaged with ePortfolio along the way? That is very useful in thinking about sort of that longitudinal process. But I was kind of inspired by Andrew Longhofer's presentation at the annual meeting last week, where he gave us sort of a call to action to really think about how can we help students to bring in their learning experiences that happen outside the classroom and how might we engage with our colleagues on the student affairs side and not just stay grounded in academic affairs. So I'm kind of thinking about organizing these components a little bit differently in terms of what's happening within the curriculum and what are the extracurricular pieces that we might be supporting. And also when I talk about reaching students directly, I'm thinking of me or one of my colleagues in the center who has students in front of them, even though that sometimes means online in front of them, versus we are convincing our colleagues, whether that's in an academic department or through student life or elsewhere, to engage with ePortfolio where they're meeting those students. And I think that framing I think it's useful in helping us think about where we place our efforts and also the way that those efforts might be received and experienced by students. So this is the first time I've tried this framing. We're going to find out together in real time how well it works. I'd love to hear your comments on kind of how that works or any suggestions about that. And then we'll wrap up thinking about some of those emergent properties that we hope to see from this system. So a little bit of institutional context. Ohio State adopted PebblePad for ePortfolio use starting in autumn 2022. And the initial use case for PebblePad was for integration into 2 bookends courses that were being built as part of our general education redesign. So ePortfolio was baked into those classes from the start. And the lunch seminar, students take that near the beginning of their program, and they take the reflection seminar closer to the end of their program. And that is awesome. All of our undergraduate students are getting that experience with reflection and ePortfolio at those 2 points in their program. And also, it kind of begs the question is what happens in between, right? And how can we help students to sustain that engagement between those 2 courses? And we felt like there's an opportunity for us to encourage that through the honors programs. So we operate as a center, not as a college. So we do not have students coming to us to take a common course or a common set of courses. And this provides a little bit of a challenge for us. We rely quite a bit on collaboration and partnership with the 16 college-based honors programs. We also have students at 3 of our regional campuses who start there in honors and then later may move to the Columbus campus to complete their program and complete those honors expectations. So we don't have this common curricular experience, but we do have a set of honors standards that went into effect in autumn 2024, and that unites all of those programs. So I'm very grateful that Theresa and others did all of the hard work and all of the conversations to get all of the programs on board with those standards. That was before I came on board, so I didn't have to be part of those conversations. But this is a common set of expectations for all of our honors students. And the one that is particularly relevant for us is this compilation of an honors ePortfolio. So how do we actually implement this? We have an ePortfolio workbook that has some more what we think of as backstage pieces and more showcase or on-stage pieces. So our workbook is built around milestones that tie thematically to honors curriculum, as well as some of the hooks that we think will keep students engaged, things like career connections. And each milestone is a series of reflective templates. We have what we call a milestone wrapper at the end of each, which encourages students to look back on their work and their reflections across the milestone. There are multiple opportunities for students to select representative work and evidence to demonstrate their learning. Also, at the end of each milestone, we ask students to create a showcase page, so that more kind of public-facing piece. And so the idea is that as they approach the end of their program, they've already created several of these showcase pages, and those can form the backbone of their showcase portfolio. So that's kind of another hook. The students know that they have this expectation to create the honors portfolio. The workbook helps them work toward that throughout their program. And then we know that a lot of the value is really from that reflection and integration of learning that happens along the way. So we still don't have a common course or a common curriculum to implement this portfolio. So the challenge is, how do we actually get students to use this thing, right? And so in the development itself, we have collaborated quite a bit with partners across campus to design reflections that can help students to bring in the work that they're doing elsewhere, so that it doesn't feel like the workbook is something extra or something redundant, and heaven forbid, we don't want them to think of it as busy work, right? So we work with our partners on that. We have a team of student workers, our ePortfolio explorers, who have been really invaluable in giving us a student read on the templates as we're developing them. They've given us some really good ideas of things that we did not think to include. So getting that student perspective has been incredibly important. In terms of how do we actually engage our students, we think a lot about connecting to where the students are, whether that's in a class or in extracurricular activities. We also provide resources. We do a lot of outreach to our campus partners to help them talk to students about ePortfolio. And then we're also thinking a lot about messages that can come from peers rather than coming from us, which we know is really powerful. So some of those direct connections, we're actually able to share the ePortfolio workbook with students at summer orientation. So we've been able to carve out about 5 minutes in a 1-hour honors orientation session that's part of a broader 2-day orientation program. So we just get the students to kind of dip their toes into the ePortfolio water. They just hear a little bit about it. They're introduced to the idea. It will be a tiny bit more familiar once they start using it, once they come to campus and start diving into their program. Last year, we started some preview sessions, some optional online sessions for those incoming students to meet other incoming honors students and also just get a little bit of practice and introduction to ePortfolio. Our honors community advocates, our HCAs, those are the folks in this image. This is a fantastic group of second-year honors students. They are employees of the Honors and Scholars Center, and they work really as peer mentors. They facilitate programming for mostly first and second year students in our residence halls. So that's one of the ways we can get students to be hearing from other students about how they use ePortfolio. I work with this group throughout the year. They have an orientation to the HCA position right before the start of the fall term. And I work with them to develop an About Me page that they can then use to introduce themselves to the other students that they're working with. We have a series of workshops we've developed for our first year success series sessions that is coordinated through our Office of Student Life. Those engage students with specific pieces of the workbook. And then we have our student employees in our Honors and Scholars Center who use ePortfolio to reflect on the skills that they're developing in their position. And then we have a new colleague, Laura Frias, who has just joined us a few months ago, and her charge in her new position is to develop a peer network program to support our 3rd and 4th year students. And we've been talking with her quite a bit about how we might be able to incorporate reflection through ePortfolio as part of that support. Some of those indirect connections, so where we are trying to encourage our colleagues to talk with students about ePortfolio, something that's kind of outside of our area, but the whole GE Bookends program, as well as individual courses where faculty are bringing in ePortfolio, or program level initiatives like our nursing program, That just kind of contributes to a culture of using ePortfolio across the university. Early in our implementation, we would sometimes hear students say, oh, PebblePad, that's that thing we used in launch seminar, right? That's not the perception we want. We want that to be kind of perceived more as this is just something that we use for reflection, kind of in many different areas of the university. Our students do take an honors survey course. Those are managed and taught within the individual college programs. So we work with those instructors to provide resources to help them talk to students about ePortfolio. We're very excited that our honors community advocates allowed us to interview them and record those interviews. So we're developing a short video so that students can hear from those other students about how they value ePortfolio. And then we work with instructors who are interested in developing new honors courses or honors embedded courses. We have course development grants to support that. And we've built ePortfolio into our course design institute. We also have a regular newsletter that goes out to our honors instructors. And we always talk a little bit about ePortfolio in each of those. Some of our extracurricular connections, and really the first three here, these are other program areas within academic enrichment. We have a group of scholars programs. The image here is from our Law and Society scholars programs. So our colleague Devika Carr does an amazing job incorporating ePortfolio into her program. Our second year transformational experience program, which is it's an extracurricular program, and we know a number of our honor students participate in that. They choose to participate in STEP. They are starting to pilot some use of ePortfolio in some of the small cohort groups that they run. Our colleague Ashley Astra she manages our undergraduate research apprenticeship program and has incorporated ePortfolio to help students reflect not just on what they're learning through a research internship, but also what they're learning about that process of research and kind of their takeaways and how that's affecting their path. We've been doing a lot of work with colleagues in career services, and we are hopeful that the templates they have helped us to build is something that we're not using just for our honors students. We think those could be beneficial to students all across campus. So we are making those templates available to the career services offices, and we'll hope to see more adoption of those moving forward. So some of these emergent properties that we hope to see, again, that kind of normalization or socialization of ePortfolio at Ohio State, and really kind of building this reflection of building a culture of reflection and folio thinking. So that's just part of being at Ohio State. This is what we do. And what we really hope happens is that students will become motivated to engage with ePortfolio on their own, not because it's in a class or because someone else is telling them that that's what they need to do. And I just wanted to leave you with a little bit of the feedback that we've received from students from our first year success series sessions. These are some of the things that kind of inspire us to keep going. So a student who's a little bit more introverted and finds a way to express themselves more easily through ePortfolio. Another student who found it useful for kind of organizing their thoughts and their reflections as they move through their program. And a student who totals reflection is an underrated avenue for learning more about yourself and growing. These are things important for first year students to learn how to do as they start their independent journeys. So I believe we have a few minutes remaining. Love to take any questions or comments. Theresa might be able to see the chat easier than I can, but thank you so much. Yeah, I wish that was my house. It's a really cool house. It used to be the house for the university president and the president's family back in the day.
Corrie, I'm just
So
going to pretend it is from now
we're very
on.
lucky to
When
have
anyone
it.
says like the Ohio State, I'm going to be like, my friend
Yep.
Corrie lives on that house.
Yeah, and we find that the grants help incentivize faculty engagement. We had our first cohort in the spring, and we had, I think, 16 faculty. We actually ended up having to divide the cohort into some subgroups. It was kind of a little bit too large for what we had planned. So I think it definitely helps. The grants are structured so that students or the faculty complete the CDI, they get part of the grant funding, and then once their course is approved, they get the remainder of it. And I think we really kind of build in strong encouragement for the faculty to incorporate ePortfolio into their courses. So I definitely think that helps. And yeah, I agree with what Theresa added there.
Corrie, it's been what, 18 months now? Have we been working on this new version, this new structure for a year and a half? Is that right?
That's about right. Yes. Yeah.
And it's the whole concept of really we knew we wanted to build it in such a way that it would interact with students as it would be there for them to use as they did other things. But the idea of really using the creation of it and the way that it's built and bringing all of those other folks in is sort of been secondary. It just we sort of realized as we began to build this. Corey said, you know, I really shouldn't be building this on my own because we have experts. Why aren't we bringing people in to help with this? And so it's you know, like most things, you bring people in and they give you some good ideas, but then they also get excited, and then you realize that, oh, this is a good way to create, you know, situations where people are willing to um, be the messenger, you know, to carry the message to the students and to other faculty. And so it's just like you hope, you know, you plant these seeds and it's starting to grow and mature and spread. And it's been a real joy to see it happen.
We presented to a in-house OSU teaching conference recently, and one of our first questions was, you know, who's familiar with ePortfolio, and we were so pleasantly surprised to see how many hands went up, because I think even a year or two ago we wouldn't have had that same response. So the word is spreading, and people are starting to really kind of embrace the possibility.
Debbie, you asked about challenges that the faculty describe. I think that I think faculty are a little bit overwhelmed at first about we are really pushing the idea of them carefully considering what makes an honors course and how is it different from a non-honors course. And then adding to that and saying, okay, and now let's build in ePortfolio pedagogy. I think they at first find that daunting. And they tell us that they're nervous about how to do that. But I think once they find that those two things actually fit together, that doing it this way makes it what we think of as an honors course, building in that reflection, and that that's not difficult for them to do, that they don't have to be experts at PebblePad to make that happen. Um, you know, and then there's always a few in the room that get really excited and say, "Oh, Corey, can I talk to you about? I have this idea, but I don't know how to build." You know, it's um, and, you know, Corey's becoming famous for pebbleizing anything that people can think of, you know. They think of it and she figures out how to put it in. So,
And some of them will really embrace the technology as well. We have definitely kind of a range. Some of
mhm.
them will send me a Word doc and say, "Can you turn this into a template or a workbook?" And sure, we can do that. But it's great when we see the faculty or the staff member that really kind of just runs with it, and I'm just kind of giving some tips along the way.
So, Corey, are there any things that you can point to as indicators of which faculty are going to run with it and which faculty members are going to want more support?
That's a great question. I would say broadly, I probably work with more people who need a little bit more support. I, what are those indicators? Really, I've been kind of pleasantly surprised in a couple of cases where I kind of went into a consultation thinking, okay, I might be, building a draft, for example, and we'll go from there. And then the other person just kind of runs with it. I haven't figured out what is if it's just personal disposition or comfort with learning new technologies. I haven't figured out what's the key there. Um,
I think it's more, but I don't think it's they all seem to get the importance of the reflection. That's not, the
yeah,
concept when we explain the idea of why an e-portfolio is valuable, that is almost never a roadblock. They get that and they like that idea. Convincing them to use the software to give it a chance is sometimes a little more daunting. I mean, if you work at Ohio State, you have been through so many iterations of so many different kinds of software that you've been asked to use for so many kinds of purposes. And they say, this is the one, this is the one. And 6 months later, they say, and now we're going to be transitioning to another one. And so people just get tired. They get overwhelmed by the number of software things that they need to learn. So I think that there's always, and we're not in charge of that either, and we hope that it stays Pebble Pad, and it's been wonderful so far, and we tell people that there's no intention to jerk us around and make us use different things, that we are hopeful that we're going to be using this for a long time to come. But that's hard to believe when you've been through what the kinds of software uh, merry-go-round that OSU puts us through. So I think that's often the real issue is how comfortable are they with new software and how willing are they? How long have they been there and how many different kinds of software have they already been asked to learn in their 15 years of work at Ohio State? Um, but it's so easy to use. And so if Corey can just get them in and start showing them things, most people are not, the software becomes a background noise. It's not really the issue anymore.
And it's my understanding that it integrates with the pain management system really well.
I think that there are probably ways where it could be more integrated, but it works great. It is the students can easily put a URL. There's a specific way that they can choose to share work that they've done in PebblePad, and they put it in Carmen Canvas. That's what we use. Um, and then they can just do the grading through there. They just click on the link and then leave the comments. They can they can leave the comments in PebblePad or they can leave it in Canvas. So it's
and
not there's
Theresa, I've got some information we haven't even talked about yet. This is kind of hot off the
Ooh,
presses, but later this summer, we're moving to a version that will have a little bit more integration with Canvas than we have right now, which is exciting.
yay!
Love these hot off the presses announcements.
I know it's so exciting. And I know when they're in Canvas, there can be like a block or like a button that you can push to go directly into PebblePad. So they don't have to get out and go somewhere else. And, and once you're logged into both of them, then it's seamless to kind of jump back and forth.
Oh, there go our weekly tornado sirens. So it must be noon.
It must be noon.
Easter Standard, it's noon.
I I always love moving to a new city and trying to figure out why those things are going off.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
It's
so
always
that
fun.
that was fun because there it only went off once a week. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. We really appreciate your time